Hello and welcome back to my channel. In this video, we're going to model some cute robots for use in animation and gaming. I'm going to make them as expressive and detailed as possible while maintaining a reasonable poly count. Bear in mind that this video is made as beginner friendly as possible, so whether you're a seasoned developer looking for inspiration or a beginner, this video is definitely for you. So without delay, let us get started. So in your Blender scene, press Shift A to add a cube and give it a subdivision of 2. Now enter edit mode, and before applying the subdivision modifier, I want you to mold the subdivided cube into whatever shape that you want. I'm going for a V shape, as you can see here. Once you're satisfied with the shape, shade it smooth, then go back into edit mode after you apply the modifier and give it a mirror modifier. Select the bottom faces of your model, inset them, and use loop tool circle to turn them into a circle, then extrude them downwards. Add a couple of loop cuts. Delete the bottom faces. Once you have enough loop cuts, select each other loop cut and scale them up. Now we're going to add another cube and subdivide it as well to shape the body. And I'm just making sure that the scale matches my head. I'm going to go back and shape them. But for now I'm going to add a subdivision modifier of 1 level, which is enough. Do the same as I did with the head. And after applying the modifier, I'm going to bevel one of the loop cuts and scale it down to separate the pelvis from the abdominal area, and scale it down using proportional edit. Then separate this part that I selected here using V, connect it again. I'm going to add a loop cut in the middle. I'm going to add a loop cut going across the body so I can use the circle tool again. I forgot to add the mirror modifier here, but that's okay, I can add it now and it will copy the changes that I made instantly. Make sure you're satisfied with your block-out before moving on to any other step. Now, press Shift S with your shoulder loop selected, so you can move the cursor there, and add a sphere. This is basically going to constitute our shoulder. Rotate it on the X-axis after you've scaled it down to an appropriate level. Scale it back on the Y. Shade it smooth, there's no need for you to add a subdivision modifier, and delete every other edge so you can get perfect quad topology. Now delete the second half, extrude the innermost edge and scale it up so you can cover the innermost part of the body. Mirror it on the Y-axis. And there you go, we have shoulders. Now I'm going to show you how to make the visor. Select the faces where you want the visor to be, and redirect topology by using the knife tool. The same way I'm gonna do here. Observe what I'm doing. What I'm basically doing is, when I'm going to add a loop to sharpen the edge that I made here by extruding the faces, I don't want it to go across the body. I just want it to be localized where I want it to be. Just like this. And when I add the subdivision surface modifier, I have a very sharp edge that I made. This is how you handle corners while doing hard surface modeling. So anyway, duplicate the innermost faces, press Shift H to hide the rest of the body, and extrude these edges inwards to make them sharp, and add a loop cut. Now look what you have. This is called paneling, as I said. Hide it again, and extrude these innermost faces inwards, so we can have room for the eyes. Select one of the vertices and do the same thing we did with the shoulders, like Shift S to add the cursor, then add in a cylinder for the eyes. And we're going to make the eyes really simple. We don't need to go into much details, because I'm going to give them a glass visor and you're not going to be able to notice what's inside really. Shape them however you want, and make sure when you close them, you use grid fill. You don't just press F, because we want quad topology, as I said. Just in case you're going to use this in a game engine. Shape it however you want by adding loop cuts where it's needed, pulling them outwards, scaling them down, etc. And I'm satisfied with the shape that my robot has, But now I want to add something to him. I'm going to use the knife tool to make a makeshift circle on the top of his head, because I don't want to inset the faces. It will change the way my robot looks. I prefer doing this using the knife tool. Then I'm going to connect it like this so I can maintain quad topology. As I said, quad topology is really important. I've just realized I have not applied clipping to my model, so before you move on, apply clipping. Inset the faces to maintain the integrity of the circle that you're making. Sorry, apply clipping. Then extrude it downwards. Then upwards again. Just like we did with the neck, you can add some details to it by adding some loop cuts and scaling every other loop cut. This is basically going to be the fan on top of my robot's head. I want to make something like a copter robot, the ones that you see in old cartoons. Or you can just give him an antenna. I mean, this part is optional. Get creative with however you want to make your robot. And you can bevel the loop cuts that you made to make them more apparent while using the subdivision surface modifier. Be careful not to go too much. Again, we're going for a low poly count. Select the uppermost faces, extrude them upwards again, so we can determine where the fans are going to be. And before you move on, of course, look at your entire model. And just check to see if the extension that you made, does it match the head, and does the head match the rest of the body? It's never too late to correct proportions. Just as always, bevel a loop cut and extrude it inwards, scale it inwards, so you can determine where you want the fans to be. Let me see here. It could be scaled down, in my opinion. Remember, when you want to scale something, you can press Shift Z to scale it only on the Y and X axes, and not change how it's scaled on the rest of the axes. Now, to make the ears, or the headphones, or whatever, select the faces that you want to turn into a circle, and make sure they're only about 4 faces, because they're going to be distorted if you select like 6 faces or something. I'm going to undo my selection by pressing Shift Z and extrude in only 4 faces inwards, inserting them until I get a shape I'm satisfied with. Then I'm going to add support and loop cuts when needed. And don't be very generous with those. Again, we want a low poly count just in case we're going to export it to a game engine. Be wise with your loop cuts. You can change the matte cap to sort of get an idea of how your model is going to look when you apply roughness to it in shaders. And here I want to start adding the arms. Again, I'm going to add a cylinder. Just one. And I'm trying to go with Bender's arm, if you're familiar with Futurama. And how I'm going to go about this is I'm going to model this one cylinder in a way that I like. Just like this, and scale these 2 loop cuts on the y-axis. Do not close the face because I'm going to use it for the hands. Then I'm going to add an array modifier and make sure it's in the right position so I don't mess up my normals. And after adding the array modifier, I need a mirror modifier to have the hands on both sides. Now I just need to give them a curve to put them in the right position. You can leave them like this if you want to rig your character, but I want to make it look good in the final render before I start rigging. And I don't have a problem with moving the hands, but keeping your character in the T-pose is perfect when you want to rig it. makes your life easier. Let me check the normals real quick, and they're fine so far. And by the way, I should have mentioned this earlier, but make sure your cylinders are as low poly as possible while maintaining as much detail as you want without adding any subdivisions, because this will really increase your poly count using this method of arrays. Now with that being said, I'm going to add a curve to which I'm going to shape the arms that I just made, and make sure that the curve is in the right position and that the modifier stack is in the right arrangement when you try to add the curve modifier. Select it using the pipette, and this is what I meant about making sure your curve is in the right position in the modifier stack. It should be on the x-axis. Yes, move it a bit closer. Now go into edit mode and shape the curve how you want the hands to be. As you can see here, the hands are following the curve. He already looks like Bender a bit. Maybe I could use just one more array. Now we can apply the modifiers and we can start working on the hands. I'm going to give him something very simple, not too much details, maybe some fans so he can grab things with his hands. I'm not sure that I want to rig them, maybe I'll just have them rotate. Inset the face, and this is how I'm gonna add multiple fingers to his hands. Select each face. You see here. Press I twice to inset, then extrude them outwards, press S to scale, and you got the hands. Now we need to make the fan blades. Press Shift S to move the 3D cursor to where you want the fan to be. Press Shift A to add a plane. Scale it down to the appropriate size that you need. Here I'm placing it in a proper position, just where the fans are supposed to protrude from. I'm giving it extrusions for thickness. Then I'm going to simply shape the fan however I want it to be. Nothing too fancy. And if you're wondering how we're going to make the other fans and rotate them around this axis, you're gonna have to change from world normal to gimbal over here, 3D cursor, sorry, and duplicate the fan and rotate it on the Z axis. See here, it's rotating around the 3D cursor. The 3D cursor is a very useful tool when modeling, honestly. It's sorely missing in Maya. Now we can move on to making other robots using this method and make more variations. I'm going to add a cube again and subdivide it. Only 2 subdivisions this time. And extrude the upper face. This might look a bit wrong at first. It looks like a teardrop, but indulge me here. It looks like a water drop because I want it to be an underwater robot, that's why. I'm satisfied with this amount of faces. This time I'm not going to add any more subdivisions. I think it looks cuter when the visor is round, so I'm going to smooth the extrusion that I made. Again, I'm going to use the loop tools to add a propulsion system underneath here. And here I'm just going to add edges because this upper cone-shaped thing is supposed to be made of glass, and inside I'm going to have like a light so he can see underwater. And just from these simple shapes you can make some really interesting robots with expressive features like the eyes and the head being somewhat childish looking. There we go. Done and done. All is left is to make the eyes here. I can just add 2 cylinders like I did with the previous robot. There's no need for a subdivision, I'm just trying to see if there are any shading issues. I'm going to adjust the shapes very quickly here by entering edit mode. There's this line that's bothering me over here. And I think this is good. Move this up just a tad. Yeah, this looks fine. I'll come back to it later, but this is acceptable. Now I can move on to UV unwrapping the robots that I made. And the process is going to be extremely simple because the shapes that we made are very primitive. The only reason that I'm UV unwrapping it, honestly, is because when I'm adding bump or roughness information, I don't want it to be stretched. So a simple line here and there can make a huge difference. Just follow through what I'm doing, and you can experiment with this. Just pretend that you're unwrapping clothes. I mean, this is the best example I can give. Either you're unwrapping clothes or you are unwrapping a cardboard box, which is another popular example when people try to explain UV unwrapping. And make sure that the cubes are of similar proportions. See the small cubes here? So basically the entire point of UV unwrapping in this particular scenario is when I want to apply a texture to it, I don't want it to be warped in places and stretched in other places. So I need to strategically place my seams. There are some parts that are already looking good, like the shoulders here. I mean, I don't need to UV unwrap this. But the arms could use some UV unwrapping, especially at the hands. Just one seam, maybe a seam around each finger, could make a huge difference when applying a material. And this is looking good, but I forgot to UV unwrap the visor. That's going to be simple. All I need to do is just select the visor and UV unwrap it. It's basically just plain, and it will look decent enough. All I'm gonna do anyway is just add a glass material to it and maybe some roughness. The body's looking good too. Some stretching near the shoulders, but that's nothing that triplanar and Substance Painter can't fix. These guys look decent. And if you want to do it the lazy way, all you have to do is just give each and every single one of these body parts, so to speak, or robotic parts, to be more accurate, give it a different material, the material that you want to portray on it, whether it be plastic or metal, then do a smart UV unwrap. And this is what I did with this robot here. All I did was just add some seams to the different shapes, or where one shape starts and the other ends. Like for example, where I wanted the class, I added a seam. Where I wanted the propeller to start, I added a seam. Then in Substance Painter, all I did basically was add albedos, metal, and roughness information. And to add albedos properly, you shouldn't be distracted by the light. Just have the albedo channel activated. And as you see here, all I did was just some roughness on the face. I added some roughness variation using triplanar. As for the height, I only had some height and some normals on the shoulders because I wanted to make them something of a different material. I added some protrusions, so to speak. Same thing with the neck and the helicopter part, helicopter neck, so to speak. And I'm satisfied with this outcome. As for the other character, here you see me, I'm applying the albedos while activating only the albedo channel. And I'm sort of into the yellow and black and blue colors. Maybe I'll make another character with some variations here and there with the same shape and use a hue saturation node in Blender to give me some different colors. Otherwise, I'm satisfied with what I have here. And here I'm going to give it a darker color because I want to portray that this is something that's used underwater. I'm gonna make it hazy. I'm gonna make sure to give it some roughness in Blender. This should be light blue. I'm kind of feeling the orange a bit more. But again, as I said, once I apply those in Blender, I can just experiment with a hue saturation node. Maybe I'll have one material where it's orange, the other where it's blue, one where it's dark blue. Now I just need to add some quick materials to the eyes. This looks right. And now all that's left is basically the shading. And what I did here is just I applied the albedos and the roughness. One quick tip, if you're applying roughness, you can also add a color ramp to your roughness channel. From here on you can control the roughness even more with the color ramp. Perhaps if you added some droplets or some grunge or whatever. But in my case I did not do that, so I'm just going to use the exact roughness that I got from Substance Painter. As for the metallic, I had it lowered down so it looks more plasticky and friendly, I guess. I made some changes to the initial model that I modeled with you guys. I made these fans bigger, and I made the head more friendly and cartoony and less sharp, but I kept the techniques that I made with you guys so you can replicate exactly what I did. Let me try to select the... Wait, I want to select his inner eyes, calling him the flying drone. Which cylinder is it? Yes, the eyes. What I basically did for the eyes is I added an emission shader. Where's the lenses? At the lenses, I added an emission shader. Gave it an emission strength of 15. And so I can preview it in EV. I'm gonna render it in cycles, but I want to see it in EV just to get an idea of how it's going to look like in a game engine. I added the bloom and the ambient occlusion. That's what the lenses look like. I think it's way cooler when you have like a glass visor and inside you have like some emission from lenses. It reminds me of some early works Pixar did. I believe the character is called Evie. It was with Wally. I don't remember the character's name, but I'm pretty sure you guys have an idea of what I'm talking about. And as for the visor, I basically gave it a principal BSDF, but with a high transmission, and I enabled transmission within EV so I can see how it looks like. And moving on to the final step, which is lighting, I'm gonna keep it really simple. I'm just gonna give it a 3-point lighting system. And this will make all the difference in your scene if you have good lighting. Let's see, I'm going to give this primary light a strength of 150 and increase its radius. Then I'm going to shift deduplicate it and have a rim light over here which has a strength of 50. Perhaps I'm going to close up the radius here just a bit. this is going to be the main character of my scene. Of course, I'm going to have 3 characters in the final render. And Shift D, Shift Z, put it right back of the character. This is going to be the rim light, which is usually the light with the highest power of them all. Let's give him this vibe. Close up the radius to emphasize the rim. Pull it down. Perhaps use an area light for the... Let me see how an area light looks like. Sorry, minus 90. RY minus 90. Okay. Yeah, spotlight looks better. Move it back on the x-axis. Yes, here's the rim that I want. Improve the radius. I think this power is fine. And with the bloom effect, this looks wonderful. All I need to do now is just add the background with a simple plane. And this is ready to go. Now here is what my final scene looks like in EV. Now let me see what it looks like in Cycles. And there you go. This is how you can make cute looking robots for video games and animations really quickly using primitive shapes and have them be very expressive. I hope you enjoyed this video tutorial. Please like and subscribe if you like this video, and I'll see you in the next one.